Today, we are looking at none other than Robert the doll, the most haunted doll in the world. Get settled in, make yourself comfortable, hit subscribe, and let's dive right in.
Every single day, a museum in Key West, Florida, gets these, frantic apology letters from all over the world.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Right. I mean, the writers are literally begging for forgiveness for things like torn rotator cuffs, sudden divorces, shattered bones, and even lightning strikes.
And they aren't writing to the museum director either.
Exactly. They're apologizing to a 3-foot-tall antique doll stuffed with wood wool.
It sounds completely absurd on the surface, you know?
Right.
But when you look at the sheer volume of these letters, you realize you're looking at a massive physical archive of human misery.
Yeah.
And it's all pinned on a single inanimate object.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking you along today to look at the story of Robert the doll. He's an artifact currently housed at the Fort East Martello Museum, and, well, he's famously known as the most haunted doll in the world.
He really is.
We've got a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. We're talking Historical Society records, museum archives, and accounts of local Key West folklore.
Which is fascinating stuff on its own.
It really is.
Yeah.
But our mission today is to, cut through the vague, spooky campfire myths. We want to construct a strict, logical timeline of the specific mishaps, injuries, accidents, and deaths that have been directly blamed on Robert over the last century.
Because we really need to understand how a child's toy became this perceived global threat. That's a totally necessary approach. I mean, when you're dealing with an object that supposedly curses thousands of people, you can't just look at the modern phenomenon.
Right, you have to map the escalation.
Exactly. You need to trace the behavioral contagion back to patient zero.
And to do that, we need to wind the clock way back to 1904, to the exact moment this thing was introduced to humanity.
So the timeline begins in Germany with the Steiff Company.
The teddy bear people. Really.
Yeah, that's the same manufacturer that famously invented the original teddy bear.
Ugh.
But this specific figure was entirely different.
Totally different.
For one, he's an unusual 40 inches tall.
Which is huge for a doll.
It's massive. And he's stuffed with wood wool, which is also known as excelsior. Museum historians have actually looked at his construction. You know, his massive size, the pockmarked cloth face, the slightly unnerving smirk. And they concluded he was never actually intended for retail sale as a child's plaything.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he was originally manufactured to be a jester for a storefront window display.
But somehow, this life-size window jester makes his way to America and is given to a young boy in Key West named Robert Eugene Otto.
Who goes by Gene.
Right, Gene. Now, the sources present two wildly different origin stories for how Gene actually got his hands on the doll.
Always the case with these legends?
Always. So the factual documented origin is simply that Gene's grandfather purchased the doll while on a trip to Germany and brought it back as a birthday gift in 1904.
Right, but folklore hates a mundane origin.
Oh, it really does.
The local legend claims the doll was given to Gene by a Bohemian servant who was seeking revenge for being mistreated by the Otto family.
The cursed origin.
Exactly. She supposedly hexed the doll using obeah, or voodoo. There's even a deeply unsettling competing rumor that the little sailor suit the doll wears was repurposed from the pajamas of another local boy who had died of yellow fever.
Ugh, that is so dark. But I hear what you're saying about folklore. Given how isolated Key West was in 1904, I mean, it was this intense melting pot of cultures, superstitions, and sudden illnesses. You can see why those rumors took root.
Oh, absolutely.
But I want to set aside the yellow fever pajamas for a second, because the immediate aftermath of the doll's arrival is chaotic enough on its own.
It really is.
Gene decides to name the doll Robert, after himself, and the first wave of mishaps begins almost instantly. And we aren't talking about, misplaced toys or spilled milk.
Not at all.
We're talking about heavy, solid wood Victorian furniture being violently overturned in Gene's bedroom in the middle of the night.
The accounts from the household are incredibly consistent on this point, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gene's parents would wake up to these terrible crashing sounds echoing through the house. They'd rush into the bedroom to find the space completely destroyed.
Just totally trashed.
Wardrobes shifted, chairs tossed. Gene's other toys would be found physically mutilated, their heads popped off or limbs torn apart.
That is terrifying.
And there would be Gene cowering in absolute terror on his bed, while this 40-inch doll sat perfectly still at the foot of the bed.
And Gene's constant refrain, every single time the parents burst into the room, was just, Robert did it.
Just Robert did it.
Now, there's a universal phase of childhood where kids invent an imaginary culprit for their mischief.
Sure.
You find a broken vase, the kid points to thin air and says, "Mister, nobody did it."
Yeah.
But I have to push back on the physical logistics here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Gene Otto was a small, notoriously sickly 4-year-old boy. How does a young child manage to completely overturn heavy Victorian bedroom furniture by himself in the dead of night while simultaneously crying in sheer terror?
That's the exact detail that elevates this beyond a standard childhood fable.
Right, because it's physically impossible.
In psychology, we look at this through the lens of something called displacement blame.
Okay.
It's incredibly common for children, especially those with strict, distant parents in the Victorian era, to project their repressed anger onto a surrogate object.
So Robert basically becomes the vessel for Gene's acting out.
Exactly. However, you're right to point out the logistics. The sheer violence of these early mishaps sets a much darker baseline than standard childhood imagination.
It's so extreme.
And furthermore, the sources note that Gene's parents frequently heard a distinct secondary voice responding to Gene when he was alone in his room.
Wait, so they thought the kid was just doing different voices while playing?
Well, that was the initial assumption. But the parents and the servants eventually described it as a completely different, deeper tone.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't just Gene throwing his voice. They claimed it sounded like a separate entity entirely.
See, that gives me chills. But, childhood defense mechanisms are supposed to fade as we grow up. You outgrow the imaginary friend.
Usually, yes.
The turning point in this story, the moment Robert stops being a psychological crutch and becomes an actual physical threat, happens when Gene becomes an adult, yet flat out refuses to outgrow the doll.
Which brings us to the 1930s.
Right.
Gene actually leaves Key West for a while. He goes to Europe to study art, meets a woman named Anne in Paris, marries her, and eventually returns to the Otto family home in Key West.
That's the property now known as the Artist House, right?
Yep, that's the one.
And he brings Anne right into the madness. I mean, the household staff, many of whom were terrified of the doll's unexplained movements, just start quitting.
They're just walking out.
The atmosphere in the house becomes so intensely oppressive that Gene's aunt finally intervenes. She furiously takes Robert and locks him away in the attic to put a stop to the insanity.
Which brings us to the first suspected death on our timeline. According to the local records and the deep-seated lore of the island, that very same aunt, the one who banished Robert to the attic, died the exact night she locked him away.
Just boom, gone. And in the medical reality of the 1930s, sudden, unexplained deaths happened. But the timing is what supercharges the myth.
Absolutely.
Following her sudden death, an adult, Gene Otto, retrieves Robert from the attic. He moves him into the turret room, which is this space with a prominent window overlooking the street.
So everyone can see him.
Right. And Gene is a grown man now. He's a married artist. But his behavior becomes intensely erratic. He begins running through the house, violently smashing dishes, destroying furniture, and screaming.
And his excuse as a grown married man.
Robert did it.
Meanwhile, the contagion is spreading outside the house.
Yes, the school children.
School children walking past the artist house are literally running away in terror. They're reporting to their parents that the doll is actively mocking them, changing its expression and moving from window to window on its own while Gene isn't even home.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You're probably wondering why Anne, a grown woman who actively loathed this doll from the moment she saw it, would ever let her husband sit a 3-foot-tall stuffed figure at the window and even seated at their dinner table.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. To understand that, we have to look at the psychological hostage situation Gene had created.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the psychological hold the doll had established over the entire household.
Yeah.
If you trace the timeline, you see a clear, undeniable shift in this era. Robert officially transitions from a childhood scapegoat for broken toys into a dominating, oppressive force.
A real threat.
This doll is now directly linked to the severe emotional deterioration of an adult man, the destruction of a marriage, and a sudden family death.
So Anne was probably just terrified.
Anne likely tolerated it out of sheer fear of her husband's escalating instability. She probably recognized that separating Gene from Robert triggered these explosive, violent reactions.
That dynamic holds the house hostage for decades.
Yeah.
But if this was entirely just Gene's psychosis, just a man using a toy to excuse his own abusive, erratic behavior, the phenomenon should die with him.
It should have.
Let's jump to 1974. Gene Otto dies. Heartbroken, but probably incredibly relieved, Anne takes Robert, locks him inside a cedar chest in the attic, and leaves him there.
Good riddance.
Right. And passes away 2 years later. The home is subsequently purchased by a woman named Myrtle Reuter. She uncovers Robert in the attic, and she ends up living with him for 20 years.
Myrtle's tenure with the doll is critical to our timeline.
Why is that?
Because it completely destroys that theory that the haunting was purely a projection of Jean Otto's troubled mind. Once Jean died, the activity didn't stop.
It actually got worse.
In fact, it escalated to direct reported physical assaults on unrelated victims.
Now, we naturally assume malevolence here. Keep that word malevolence in mind, because there's a modern piece of evidence we're going to look at later that completely contradicts it.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
But for Myrtle Reuter and her guests in the 1970s, malevolent is exactly how it felt. The most terrifying example of this physical escalation happens to a 10-year-old girl.
This story is so intense.
She was the daughter of a family who was renting a room in the house. She found Robert in the attic and brought him down to her bedroom.
Big mistake.
Huge. In the middle of the night, the house echoed with her screams. Her parents rushed in and found her shaking, crying, and genuinely traumatized.
Just an absolute shock.
She claimed that Robert physically stood up on her bed, ran around the room, actively attacked her, and tried to kill her.
And according to the sources, she maintained that exact claim well into her adulthood.
We also have the documented incident with the plumber during Myrtle's era.
Oh, right. The plumber. He was hired to do routine prep work up in the attic. Now, Key West attics are cramped, sweltering spaces.
Miserable.
Very. While he's working, he hears disembodied giggling right behind him.
Nope, absolutely not.
He turns around to find that the 40-inch doll has moved entirely across the room on its own and is now blocking his only path to the exit.
I would have fainted.
The plumber just dropped his tools, shoved past the doll, and fled the house in absolute terror. He refused to ever go back inside.
I look at Myrtle Reuter keeping this doll for 2 decades, and it makes zero logical sense. The sources say she even took Robert with her when she moved to a completely new house in 1980.
It's baffling.
It's like moving to a new city and making sure you pack the rabid bad you're living in your basement. Why would you pack up and transport a doll that is actively causing terror, trapping plumbers, and attacking children?
It really speaks to the morbid curiosity and the paralyzing dread the artifact commands.
Like Stockholm Syndrome or something.
Basically, people who lived with him felt it was safer to keep him close than to anger him by throwing him away. But Myrtle eventually reached her breaking point.
Thank goodness.
In 1994, she finally surrendered. She donated Robert the doll to the Fort East Martello Museum, explicitly warning the museum staff that the doll moves on his own and is heavily haunted.
And here's a chilling footnote to that timeline. Myrtle Reuter died just a few months after donating him.
The timing again.
Right. Which brings us to the modern era, from 1994 to the present day. You'd think putting a stuffed doll behind a thick pane of protective museum glass would neutralize the threat.
You would think.
Instead, Robert's curse goes global.
The museum quickly learned they were dealing with something volatile, so they established a strict rule.
What's the rule?
Visitors must respectfully ask Robert for permission before taking his photograph.
And if they don't?
When visitors fail to do so, or if they mock him through the glass, the immediate consequence is technological. Cameras inexplicably break, memory cards corrupt, and cell phones completely die right there in the gallery.
But those technological glitches are just the warning shots.
Yeah, that's just the beginning.
The mishaps quickly escalate off-site, plunging us right back into severe physical injuries and catastrophes. Once these disrespectful visitors return home, their lives fall apart.
It's a complete disaster for them.
We're talking about car accidents, shattered bones, sudden severe illnesses, unexpected job losses, and bitter divorces.
The museum receives up to 3 apology letters a day from these victims, begging Robert to lift the curse.
The letters are incredibly detailed, laying out these cascading tragedies. Let me give you the specifics from one letter written by a man named Eric D.
Oh, this one was rough.
He visited Robert, took a photo without permission, and went home. Shortly after, his house was struck by lightning 3 separate times.
3 times.
He decided to take a vacation to escape the stress, but the rental home he booked caught fire the night before he checked in.
You can't make this up.
So he books a second rental home 2 nights later, and that second rental home gets struck by lightning.
Just unbelievable.
We also have letters from a woman whose husband lost a highly valuable diamond ring and then physically tore his rotator cuff right before her daughter's wedding was abruptly canceled.
The sheer volume of these catastrophic events attributed to a single visit is staggering.
Wait, so instead of realizing they just had a string of terrible random luck with lightning strikes and rental fires? The reverse engineering a paranormal cause.
That's exactly what they're doing.
How does a straw-stuffed doll locked in a glass case in southern Florida supposedly orchestrate a lightning strike on a house thousands of miles away? Is that just basic psychology at play?
To understand the mechanism here, we have to synthesize this entire timeline. We're looking at a trajectory that starts with overturned bedroom furniture in 1904, escalates to a suspected death in the 1930s, progresses to physical attacks in the 1970s, and culminates in torn rotator cuffs and lightning strikes today.
Right, it's a massive escalation.
Scientifically, we explain the modern phenomena through two powerful psychological concepts: apophenia and confirmation bias.
So apophenia is our brain's tendency to find meaningful patterns in random noise, right?
Exactly. And confirmation bias is our habit of actively seeking out information that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring anything that contradicts them.
Think of your brain like a spam filter that's suddenly been reprogrammed to flag the word Robert.
That's a great way to put it.
That's confirmation bias. You start ignoring the thousands of perfectly normal things that happen in your day, like a smooth commute to work or a great cup of coffee, and you hyperfixate on the one bad thing, like a flat tire or a pulled muscle, instantly linking it back to the doll in Key West.
That's a perfect analogy. When a visitor leaves the museum already primed with the knowledge of Robert's curse, their brain is on high alert.
They're looking for it.
They are actively waiting for the other shoe to drop. But that alone doesn't explain why people take the time to write frantic physical apology letters to a toy.
So why do they?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound psychological coping mechanism known as delegated agency.
How does that work in practice?
As human beings, we are deeply existentially terrified of random tragedy.
Oh, for sure.
The idea that a lightning strike or a canceled wedding or a devastating car accident can happen for absolutely no reason is paralyzing. It means we have zero control over our lives.
That's just a terrifying thought.
It is psychologically far more comforting to blame a devastating event on a cursed doll than to accept the cold, chaotic randomness of the universe.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Robert gives the world a tangible target to apologize to. He offers people a false sense of control over the uncontrollable chaos of life.
So delegated agency acts almost like a psychological lightning rod.
Exactly.
Robert doesn't stop the storm of bad luck from hitting your life, but he gives the chaos a safe, tangible place to strike so your own psyche doesn't have to absorb the sheer terror of random chance.
That's exactly it.
You write the letter, you apologize to the doll, and suddenly you feel like you've restored order to your life.
Yeah.
You've taken an action to stop the bad luck.
Precisely. Robert acts as a repository for modern human anxiety, just as he acted as a repository for Jean Otto's childhood misbehavior in 1904. He absorbs whatever we need him to absorb.
Looking back at the logical timeline we constructed today, it's an incredible evolution.
It really is.
I mean, in 1904, he was a simple scapegoat for a child's mischief, violently overturning furniture. By the 1930s, he's a suspect in the sudden death of Jean's aunt.
It just keeps growing.
In the 1970s, he's accused of physically attacking a 10-year-old girl in her bed and trapping plumbers in attics. And finally, today, he's a modern-day scapegoat for global accidents, injuries, and financial ruin.
It's a fascinating look at how a localized haunting transforms into a crowdsourced global curse.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final haunting detail from our sources. We mentioned earlier that you should keep the word malevolence in mind.
Yes, I've been waiting for this.
Well, this detail completely flips the dark narrative we just built. A paranormal investigator recently visited the museum and took an aura photograph of Robert the doll using specialized biofeedback equipment designed to capture electromagnetic fields.
Oh, okay.
Given his century-long history of violence, death, and misfortune, you'd expect the camera to reveal a dark, malevolent red or a pitch-black aura.
Those are the colors traditionally associated with negative energy or demonic attachments, yeah.
Right. But instead, the photograph revealed a bright blue and violet aura emanating directly from the doll.
Really?
Yes. In aura reading, those colors are strictly associated with love, peace, and deep spiritual understanding.
That contradicts every single aggressive act attributed to him over the last 100 years.
It does. It completely breaks the pattern.
Yeah.
So I want you to ponder this. What if the entity inside Robert the doll isn't the malicious cause of these century-long tragedies?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
What if instead he's a captive, misunderstood spirit, desperately trying to warn people about accidents and injuries it is entirely powerless to stop? Maybe Robert isn't Mr. Nobody committing the crimes. Maybe he's just the only one who sees them coming.
The files on this case are closed, for now, but the shadows of what happened remain. Thank you for listening to Real Life Horror Stories. If this story stayed with you, please consider leaving a comment, hitting like, or subscribing. It brightens our days, even when the stories get dark. Until next time, remember, the most terrifying monsters aren't under your bed, they're living right next door.